get into the game a little bit tonight. Johnny Mac is in the house. Johnny Mac, are you in the Super Bowl champions house yet, or you have not made that pilgrimage yet?
No, I just got here moments ago. It's always a struggle week one because I was telling Josh off the air, evidently 70,000 people have never been here before because every year week one they all forget where to park. So it's a cluster, you know what?
Already tailgating crazy.
Oh yeah.
Oh man,
it's obscene. It's obscene down here, and add in the fact that it's 95 degrees, and hey, it's Philadelphia, and I feel sorry for the parking attendants because everybody gets out of their car and starts screaming at them for 10 minutes and threatening their children, and then they go away.
Standard.
You just mentioned 95 degrees. I mean, I know, September early football games, it's hot, but it seems like this is a little bit different than what I remember for opening football game nights. I mean, you usually get a little crispness in the air for these Thursday night specials. That's going to be a little different. That could be a factor in this particular game for both these teams because I can't imagine both these teams are conditioned well enough for a 95-degree heat to play 4 quarters.
No, and I mentioned that in the 3 matchups to watch, particularly Jason Peters. If you think about the Eagles holding him out of preseason games, obviously coming off the ACL tear, now he's supposed to go from 0 to 60, 65 plays in this heat and this humidity. Now, obviously the game is much later. It's supposed to break this heat wave during the game a little bit, but hey, how do you go from that? How do you go from not playing at all to 65 snaps against Vic Beasley, Takaris McKinley, edge rushers? Not the top edge rushers in the game, but certainly Beasley has been that before if you go back to 2016. So that's something you should keep an eye on, and you're probably going to see a number of players on both sides leaving with cramps and having some of those issues.
Yeah, John's got his keys, 3 matchups, I should say, at 973ESPN.com. You mentioned McKinley and Beasley against Jason Peters. That one, the edge rushers of the Atlanta Falcons, that was an area last year where there was some concern up against Big V in that game. But overall, the Eagles did a pretty good job against that Falcons pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, they played very well defensively in that game. There's no question about that. They played very well defensively in Lincoln Financial Field in the playoffs as a whole, and then obviously had some struggles in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady. It's a little bit different, as you mentioned. The Falcons, if you look at them, probably their biggest issue, one of the most talented teams in football, but they've struggled to find a consistent pass rush. And Beasley, as I mentioned, he led the league in sacks in 2016, went all the way down to 5 last year. So they've changed it a little bit. They've taken some of the coverage responsibilities away from him, and they're going to make him more of just a pure edge rusher to see if that gets him going. But he typically lines up on the left side, which would be against Lane Johnson. But they can move him around, and I think at times, if Dan Quinn sees an advantage, he might flip-flop him. So I think Jason Peters will be seeing both of them at some point tonight.
Another area, Julio Jones, they got Ridley out there, Sanu, it's a pretty good receiving core, Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, Sidney Jones. I mean, would you, if you're Atlanta, are you targeting Sidney Jones to see if he can handle that slot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be interesting because it's really rookie against rookie. Sidney's obviously in the second year, but barely played just that last game in the meaningless regular season finale. Calvin Ridley, on the other hand, is the Falcons' first-round pick. He's going to get most of the work in the slot. So you see those two will be matching up probably quite a bit. But, if Steve Sarkisian sees a matchup he wants to get, they can move Julio Jones around. We'll see if the Eagles track him with either Darby or Mills. I don't know if they're going to do that. And Julio's one of those guys you understand he's going to get his. He's going to catch a certain number of balls, might even get 100 yards. I think you start to think you make them work as hard as possible, and then when it comes down to the fourth down, late in the game, like last year in the divisional round, maybe he doesn't make that play to beat you. That's kind of what you hope for with Julio Jones, a player like that. You know he's gonna hurt you somewhat.
Yeah, and Darby, Mills, obviously Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas. I mean, the Eagles are pretty deep at that spot, so that should be a fun matchup to watch. Not to mention you've got Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod, probably the best safety tandem in the league. The Eagles' secondary should be very equipped tonight, but one area is no Nigel Bradham. How does that affect the Eagles in terms of what Atlanta has to be able to exploit him not being there?
Well, it affects them because Atlanta, they have good running backs as well. They have two very, very good running backs. If you were to rate the skill position players around this league by team, the Falcons could be number one. That's how good they are at the skill position, certainly amongst the top three, and Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman. So they can beat you running the ball. They can beat you catching it out of the backfield. And obviously the Eagles have two very good three-down linebackers. When Jordan Hicks is healthy and he's there and he's going to be out there, but now Nigel Bradham isn't. So you're going to have to make do. Jim Schwartz talked about that earlier in the week. It's probably not going to be just one guy. So you're probably going to see Nate Gary, Camus, Grugier, Hill, and you'll even see Malcolm Jenkins, I think, in that dime package, which really isn't a dime because really Malcolm plays linebacker, and then you'll have Corey Smith rotating in at his position, Sidney Jones staying in the slot. I think you're going to see a mixture of all three of those things as far as how Jim Schwartz kind of tries to deal with the Atlanta offense.
John, how do you expect the Falcons to just try and exploit the Eagles' defense as best they can? I mean, Mike brought up Nigel Bradham, but if you're the Falcons, how are you game planning to score a bunch of points here tonight? What do you expect them to do?
Well, they always want to establish the run, and conversely, the Eagles always want to stop the run first. So I think that's where it starts, and if you can establish the run and all of a sudden the Eagles have to commit an extra guy in the box to stop it, all of a sudden you start talking about one-on-one outside with Julio Jones or Mohamed Sanu, and that's probably not going to work out very well for the Eagles. So I think that's where it starts. Each team wants to establish the running game, and running game for the Falcons, run support for the Eagles. And I think in a large part that will decide this game. If the Falcons are capable of running the football, they just have too many weapons to deal with if you have to go to man-to-man coverage to try to stop it.
How much of Jason Peters do you think we'll see tonight? He's coming off a year out of the game. Is he going to be playing 50%, 80%, 100%? What do you expect from him?
Well, if it were 70 degrees, I would tell you he's going to play 100%. That was the goal. I don't know if he's capable of playing 100% in this weather. I mean, it's awful out, and it's going to get a little bit better when the sun goes down. But again, you're talking from 0 to 65 or 70 snaps. He has not played in a game. The Eagles were playing it cautious. They didn't let him play in the preseason at all. Tore his ACL in October of last year, so it's been a long, long time. And I think, if you go back to last year, Big Z did a workman-like job on the way to the Super Bowl. By definition, it proved to be good enough, but you saw him in the preseason. He's not Jason Peters. We all know that. So the Eagles want him out there as much as possible. The question is, can he do it in this kind of weather and play the entire game? I would imagine they have to rotate him out maybe every 3 series or so just because of the weather.
Wow. And is that a Big V or a Jordan Mailata jump in?
Jordan's not going to dress. That'll be Big V. Interestingly, I don't know if you guys saw it, but
Jordan's in the Hall of Fame, though, John.
Yeah, he's going to the Hall of Fame. Not there yet. You guys, I'm sure. Have you guys joked with Baldy about that yet? But and Ross Tucker as well. he's not going to dress. The Eagles, by the way, placed Matt Collins on injured reserve. So, Carson's out.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt Collins is out. Obviously, he's on injured reserve now. But Jordan, no. I mean, the swing tackle on game day is going to be Big B.
So, with Hollins being on the injured reserve, that means he's got to miss, 6 games?
8 games if they want to bring him back. Yeah. And now remember, you also have Richard Rodgers on injured reserve, and obviously there's some kind of fire, I guess, at the NovaCare at Lincoln Financial Field. But
I just figured it's one of those tractors going in reverse.
Yeah. Richard Rodgers is already on IR. That's how they brought Marcus Wheaton back. Matt Collins is now on IR. So this team has some significant injury issues already, and we've talked about got all the guys coming back from surgery. But Matt Collins is an interesting one because last week he flat out said he was fine. He was ready to go. And then he wasn't practicing, and now he's on injured reserve. It's an interesting story. Doug Peterson, he had sports hernia surgery back in February. The Eagles did confirm that. But they claimed this was not related to that. He's got some kind of groin issue, and now he's on injured reserve. So there's something a little strange going on with Matt Collins.
Yeah, no doubt. We were talking about this earlier. Do you think, because we talked about this last year, when Sproles ultimately got hurt, and then down the road, we almost kind of said, Sproles getting hurt was almost a blessing for them because they kind of, focused on the run. They kind of, went to a more bruising running style with LeGarrette. Because you remember the game, LeGarrette didn't get any carries, and he was like, I don't make the calls. He was kind of frustrated. But is Sproles a guy that fits in this RPO style better than the personnel they had?
I don't know. I see where you're going with that, but you have to realize Darren's 35 years old, and he's really the majority of his NFL career was spent when this league didn't use RPOs at all. So he's not used to that kind of stuff. So maybe if this was a 21 or a 22-year-old Darren Sproles, perhaps that would be something different. But I'm not sure he's a better fit than a younger player who's used to running that type of thing. And that's basically every running back. Because if you look at the college game on Saturdays, basically everybody's running a ton of RPOs. So the younger backs tend to have a better feel for that than the veteran backs who weren't used to doing that when they were younger.
John, one of your matchups to watch is the coordinators. You got Jim Schwartz, Steve Sarkisian, who has kind of bounced around before finding a home here with the Atlanta Falcons. And Schwartz, we know, while he's been here a couple of years, he's probably itching to get out the door to get a head coaching job. So give us a little breakdown of that matchup tonight.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest advantages the Eagles have. I mean, you have universally one of the 5 best defensive coordinators in this league. You saw what he's done for this organization. Remember how bad this defense was before Jim Schwartz got here. Part of that had to do with, obviously, just the way Chip Kelly did things. It was impossible for the defensive side of the ball. But nonetheless, now, a couple of years later, this is one of the top 10 defenses in the NFL. So, on the other hand, I think we talked about all that talent Atlanta has, and they do at the skill positions, but they took a huge downturn when they moved on from Kyle Shanahan, who got obviously the head coaching job in San Francisco. And Steve took over as the offensive coordinator. They struggled a little bit, and he was trying to run sort of the same offense that Kyle Shanahan run. I don't think it worked out for him that well. He's got to make this offense his own, but there's no proof that he can deal with somebody at the level of Jim Schwartz.
All right, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Don't forget, we've got Pick the Perfect Score tonight at 5:30, where you guys will tell us the score of this week's Eagles game. You're playing for $100. John McMullen, what is your perfect score for tonight?
Unfortunately, everybody will kill me, but I have the Falcons winning 21-17. I just think the Eagles have too many issues from a injury standpoint. Not only the guys who aren't playing, not the Wentzes, the Alshon Jeffries, we mentioned Matt Collins, but also the guys who are coming off the injuries and expected to play, and they've barely done anything. Those are the Jason Peters, the Darren Sproles, even the Brandon Grants, who's been able to practice a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be ready to go at his typical level. So I think there's too many injury issues, and I think it might be a bit of a slow start for a very, very talented team.
All right, Johnny Mac, at JF McMullen on Twitter. You can follow him there for all his Eagles reaction and from tonight's game at Lincoln Financial Field. And, of course, he'll be back to recap it all tomorrow right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, John.
Yeah, now I'm going to race out of the building to save my life, evidently.
Well, good luck with that, man. We're all counting on you. John McMullen, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, and his appearance on the show is brought to you by Harrah's Resort in Valley's Atlantic City Wild Wild West. They're now taking bets at their new sports books. Wager today at the book. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Break up with your bookie.